Good afternoon, esports world. What's going on? What's going down? Oh my lord, look at his camera. I've got to fix that. I'm looking noob-tastic over here. I've managed to screw up the one, the only, the invenerable YamatoCannon Jacob Mempty's camera, and it looks terrible. Let me fix that for you guys. Um,
Holy moly, your intro scared me. Like I was just relaxing.
well, anybody that
Oh,
watches my podcast knows that I am a complete and utter noob when it comes to the whole podcasting genre, if you will. And so I'm gonna like really noob it up here and fix the camera right here on stream. Show you guys how it's done. This is the behind the scenes of esports, right? So I'm behind the scenes in it right now. Look at that. Oh, and that's how you set up your OBS properly. And if you were a good streamer, you probably would have gotten that right the first time. So I was thinking about this while we were listening to the classical music here. I probably should have really rocked in with like some Wu-Tang or some Tupac or something for you. I don't know if the classical was quite the right flavor.
I enjoy some classical too.
All right. I could
My
dig
favorite
it.
song is Green Sleeves. Always
Oh,
calms me down. I like all types of music.
I have no doubt. You seem like the kind of guy that definitely is like have the full palette going, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, if it's your first time here, this is Spy Cam, a glimpse inside the esports industry. I am joined by YamatoCannon, head coach of Splyce LCS team out in Europe. He is starting his second split with us coming up here in the summer. This will be his fourth split as an LCS coach. He'll have more to talk about that in a second here. But the goal of this show is to give you a little bit of the inside look of what goes on in esports. What is it that keeps the industry ticking? And maybe one day you'll decide to work in esports too, and you'll have some kind of an idea of some of the other jobs besides player that exist out there. So glad to have you here, Jacob. You want to assume that people have never heard of you before out there, although that's highly unlikely, and give your maybe a couple minutes on how you get into coaching and what your role is with the team.
You want the long story, the short story?
Hey man, whatever you want to tell, whatever you think the fans
All
will find
right.
interesting. So,
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, Marty, as always. Always a pleasure talking to you. But I don't know where to start really. Well, I was just a kid. I remember like back in school, I always had like a group of friends. We just played a bunch of random online games, and always every week there was something new, some other MMO, some other online game, and we just did it for fun. And then all of a sudden they like my friends then they showed me League of Legends, and I like it instantly clicked with me because I used to play like a bunch of Dota and Warcraft 3, and it kind of clicked. And my friends were just playing it casually, and almost like 2 weeks into playing League of Legends, I kind of like stepped away from the group because I wanted to play it really, really seriously. Because I started watching the streams like everyone else, just watching the streams like,
right.
wow, this guy. Back then it was Hacha GG and Kox and all these guys, and I just felt like I wanted to push myself in this game. And that has always been my kind of thing. Like whenever I play a specific game or anything, I want to master it and push my limits in it. I used to compete, I would say, because I was just a kid in Warcraft 3 and also in World of Warcraft and the PvP system. So I always wanted to try to become the best. And I loved League of Legends specifically because it felt like it had and has a lot of depth. And when I looked up to these guys that were streaming, I just felt like if I invest enough time into this, I think I can become as good as them. And that was when my pro player career started. And I played in a bunch of teams, and I played with a bunch of players that people most likely will recognize, like Bjergsen, Nukeduck, Mithy, Nils. Like the list is endless. And eventually, at one point, I played in the LCS, and my time in LCS was on a team called Dragonborns. And back then, it was the first split of the LCS, and everything was very unorganized
I
and
love that's old
unstructured.
school. Like we're talking only a few years ago, but that's like real old school, right?
It's really, really, really old school. It's basically like Stone Age, if you could
They
look
didn't
at
even have computers. They were
LCS
like
like.
drawing the game out by hand.
So it's like the organization was some homemade mumbo jumbo. It was a player that thought making an organization is like baking a pie. And with that in mind, it was quite kind of messy. I had to go to school at the same time as I was playing, and bear with me here, Marty. This is where the coaching part kind of starts.
No, go ahead.
Um, I we like since I invested so much time in the LCS and we didn't get anything out of it, we got relegated. Eventually, I had to kind of pick up the slack that I left in school because I was skipping a lot of lessons to play League. And while my main teacher, the guy who took care of our like kind of group, he had some kind of understanding for me and he gave me a lot of like leeway regarding this. But I had to kind of catch up. I felt like I was ending up behind, and it's always good to have a backup plan in case esports
Yep.
doesn't work out, right? And eventually, I had to take a break from League, and I took like a 6 months break. I kept playing, but of course, all these players that I used to play with, they kind of lose faith in you. You know, you can't just disappear for 6 months and all of a sudden come back and expect everyone to kind of bring you in with open arms.
Right.
And that was back in season 5. Then like it was season 4, and I kept being a part of the league scene because I did some commentary on like in Swedish with the LCS. So I made sure I was a part of the league scene, but I didn't play. So it was Mithy that had the idea, Mithy and Mr. Alice that had the idea that I should become the coach of the team called Super Hot Crew at that time that became Micho Makers. And at first I was like, oh, come on, I want to be a player. But then again, I just wanted to do something. I didn't want to just stand still. So I took the opportunity knowing like I had no idea if I wanted to do it or not. I just wanted to do something. And after working as a coach for some time, I realized rather quick that it was something that I really wanted to do. And here I am,
It's
pretty
amazing
much.
that that story is so similar to what happens in traditional entertainment. Is someone goes, "Oh, I really want to be an actor," right? And they're like, "I'm going to go in the movies. I'm going to be a big star." And then they go off to do it, and they're like, "Oh, maybe it'd be really cool to be the cameraman, or maybe it'd be really awesome to like direct this and stuff like that." And because no one goes into school going, "I'm going to go to school to become the guy who drags the cables around behind the camera," right? But that is somebody's job somewhere. So I always am fascinated by the idea that people come in to be the in front of the camera, if you will, which is the players for us in esports or the actors in movies, and then find something else that they can be just as, if not more, passionate about, right? So, very cool. And so now let's see, what you've talking what 2.5 years of coaching? Is that about right?
I think, well, this is going to be my fourth split, so it's 1.5 years pretty much.
Well, on the
And
LCS level, did you do any kind of? You're saying the LCS right away was the first coaching, though, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
pretty
gotcha,
much.
gotcha.
It's like the players that I mentioned, Mithy and Mr. Alice, and also Nuktak. They always, since I played with them in teams, they knew I had like qualities that would fit in a coaching role. Like I was always the guy that controlled people and kind of pushed people, and always was the kind of strict guy. And I guess these were qualities they saw were fit to be a coach, and they gave me the recommendation. I just went for it, pretty much.
Cool. And here, the story is now ancient history, as we said, right back in the Stone Ages. So,
Pretty much, pretty much.
I know I've talked to you about this because for anyone that doesn't know, we have the vested interest that he is the LCS coach of our team. So one thing I talked about early on with Jacob when we first brought him on was I'm a big traditional sports fan. And if you look at some of the great traditional sports franchises, I'm going to talk American franchises here because that's what I'm most familiar with, of course. But they tend to have a coach who is the identity of that team. So whether it's Bill Belichick and the Patriots, or you're talking Phil Jackson and the Chicago Bulls, or any of those kind of all-time greats. I'm a massive Spurs fan, so Greg Popovich, he's been with the Spurs forever now, and like that, no one cares nor even attempts to decide think about who the owner is and that kind of stuff. It's Greg Popovich's team, and the identity of the team is him. And you'll even see coaches who go to other organizations and they'll talk about them implementing, quote, the Greg Popovich system, right? Or when people were working with Kobe and all of a sudden they had to work in the triangle because that's Phil Jackson's system that he had put in at the Lakers. So the identity of the team almost becomes more synonymous with the coach than anyone else associated with the organization. How has that kind of affected your way of operating over the last three splits in knowing that you essentially have the ability to shape the entire identity of the team?
Well, like I think traditional sports is where everyone should take their ideas from, even in esports, because there are so many similarities. And uh, coming into, like, I had 2 months notice before I knew I would start coaching right off the bat, so I had to kind of take ideas from something. So I just looked into the sports that I love. I'm a soccer fan or a football fan, if, if people are European, the ones that are watching.
The
But just for
rule
your
is we just
sake,
call it
Marty,
football. Yeah, it's football. So,
for your sake, Marty, I'm going to call it soccer. I'm
oh,
a big fan of soccer, and they have, exactly as you explained, they have these coaches that are the identities of the teams, and usually, like, whichever club they are in, it is their team right away. And the ones that I looked up to the most were Jurgen Klopp and Jose Mourinho, a very kind of controversial guy, but he gets you the trophies. And I pretty much want to be at the computer.
it's amazing on our teams, especially how many people were football players before. Like our
Yeah.
LCS team is full of guys who just wished they could. Or some were likely to be stars in the that industry, and bad injuries at 14, 15 years old, and they had to turn to something else. So it's kind of interesting how esports can fill not just people like myself who just happen to like esports more than traditional sports, but people who end up needing to fill a competitive need, and it offers that. So I find that fascinating personally. So, here's I'm going to pull from.
I had like this knee injury, which kind of stopped me from playing at all. So I had to compete somehow, which in the end happened to be at the computer.
It's amazing on our teams, especially how many people were football players before. Like our
Yeah.
LCS team is full of guys who just wished they could. Or some were likely to be stars in the that industry, and bad injuries at 14, 15 years old, and they had to turn to something else. So it's kind of interesting how esports can fill not just people like myself who just happen to like esports more than traditional sports, but people who end up needing to fill a competitive need, and it offers that. So I find that fascinating personally. So, here's I'm going to pull from chat here. I think this is a question everyone always asks. Like, oh my God, he's so young. If you were to come to the United States, I wouldn't even be able to take you out for a beer, right? So, and you're the not just the identity, but the leader of this team that's potentially worth millions of dollars and long-term success for our organization, etc. And people always ask, how do I work with somebody so young leading a group of young men, especially some 17 years old, they're still becoming young men, right? And I will say that I'm a big believer in the idea that there are plenty of people who are older who act like young children, and people who are younger that act like wise beyond their years, which is this phrase I used to, not to pat Jacob on the back. I'll give him a figurative pat on the back here, but you're aware, you have a very self-aware nature, and I think to answer the question in chat, that's the thing that makes it really different. Is Jacob's, I think, really aware of where his strengths lie and where his weaknesses lie, and you can even see through the split. For anybody that watched us, the split in the beginning, one of my favorite results we saw was Jacob sitting there talking to the players, and they all just listen. And that's it, just talking, listening, talking, listening. And then I remember talking to our manager, who said by the end it was literally a six-man conversation. All five players and him, and their self-awareness had changed. They'd realized how to recognize when they were making mistakes before even pointed them out. So I think that self-awareness was able to pass on there. And I don't think it's for everyone. I mean, we've seen a lot of these young coaches certainly not succeed, right? Because they don't have a maturity level, or they don't have my personal pet peeve by far. There's a lot of coaches that are doing it because they think that it's a temporary thing till they can play again, and they're just not quite good enough to be pros, and they miss that. They don't realize that they're actually hurting their team because they're constantly thinking about when is their next opportunity. So I don't know if you've run across that with some of your colleagues at all.
I think I've seen that in some. Like, I've had moments myself where the thought has crossed my mind. I think it's only natural and normal if you've
Yeah.
played in the past and you kind of get this kind of flashback. Oh, maybe this is an opportunity for me to play again. But
Yeah, yeah.
I think it has always been so far away and far-fetched that it's been just like a glimpse and a flash thought that just almost instantly disappeared, because in the end I am very, very happy with what I'm doing, and I don't think I want to change that ever, because I feel like with coaching I can apply it to so many other things, not just League of Legends, right? I can apply it in life. I will be able to apply it in the future, and hopefully in the future I'll apply it to other games. And there is something about that that is very, very comforting, because being a pro player is very, very risky if you think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Is
Sure, everything is risky in esports in a way,
right.
but being a player is almost the most risky thing that you can possibly be.
I equate it to the world of dance, ballet, where a very select few get to even do it, and even those few that do are almost guaranteed to have injuries, right? And so their careers tend to be only very few do those 10-year careers. A lot of them it's 3-4 years because they blow out an Achilles or something like that, and it's incredibly risky, but for the ones that make it, it's insanely rewarding, right? So if you become Misty Copeland, anyone that's heard of her right now, she's the first African American lead dancer for the American Ballet Theater. It's like a really, really big deal in the arts world because traditionally, of course, a very closed world racially in the U.S. And for her to have succeeded is like a small pool to begin with, cut even shorter by injuries, cut even smaller by risk, all these things. So you see that great success, and like you said, you eyeball it and it can't help but think, what me, right? What about me? But it is such a very, very tiny amount. And I think we forget sometimes these players are the 0.0001% or something like that. Like they're a very tiny number. 50 players in all of Europe, so.
And it's also like one of the bigger reasons why I feel like it's so competitive for players is because practicing the game is so accessible, and you have this pool of players. I say like League of Legends has like so many millions. I'm just gonna guess it should be something around like 30 million or something. I'm not completely sure, but imagine the thought, I think everyone that plays League or plays any competitive game has had the thought cross their mind, should I try to become pro or can I become pro? I think that is something that has crossed anyone's mind. And I think if you put that in contrast with how many hours like a casual gamer, I'm saying casual, that could end up with 10 hours a day playing casually.
Yeah, no joke.
And that is going to be a competition. If you're a pro player, that is going to be a competition. So you need to maintain the same level, you need to put in the same amount of hours as everyone else. That is going to knock on your door for your job, right? And I think that makes it even harder to become and still be a pro player.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen this video. It was maybe about 2 years ago that Day9 made about the difference between accessibility and esports versus accessibility. He used basketball, and he said, if you want to dunk like LeBron James, right? Well, you've got to find a court, you need some other people around, a ball, you need nice weather, you need all these circumstances set up correctly, and they're usually pretty accessible, but there are still a number of factors that can block you. Whereas if you see Faker, and you also have to be built like LeBron, like let's not forget that part, right? And then he said, if you want to do a Faker move, right? You see Faker do one of his flashy plays, you can go to your computer, which almost everyone has these days, download League of Legends, it's free to play, and make some semblance of what he's doing right there and then. It won't be anywhere near the level, but you can replicate it on some semblance, and there's a reward there, right? Like a feeling of satisfaction that, look, I was able to do that. And that's that accessibility factor that a lot of traditional sports are losing these days. Like kids don't play baseball, for example. You have to have enough people for 2 teams, and you need all this gear, and you need all this stuff that they don't have. And whereas you have a computer, you get one issued at school half the time nowadays, right? Like you go to school and they give you a laptop to take home. So it's a very different world. So.
Yep, for sure.
I'll tell an interesting story that I think relates, Jacob, because you talk about those opportunities that you think about, it crosses your mind, but you didn't jump at them. When I was a young guy living in New York City, I was doing this off-Broadway show called Tony and Tina's Wedding. And Tony and Tina's Wedding is very unique because it had been running for like 25 years. So you have a cast of characters that are rotating in and out, and people would call in all the time, right? So they'd switch people around different roles and such. And I was the stage manager, so my job is to manage it. I'm not supposed to be in the show, but of course, what did I have? That inkling of wanting to be in all the time, right? Like, oh, I can do this, or I want to be in. And there was a night when Tony's the lead character's younger brother, the guy called in, and he couldn't make it. And I had a list of guys I could call to come in and do the show, and I gave like a half-hearted effort to call them in, right? Like I didn't really try because I knew that if I didn't get anybody, I got to play Tony's brother, and of course I did. And I had a lot of fun. But I'm not gonna lie, I regretted it afterwards, right? Like I felt like I cheated my job, and that wasn't what I was there for, right? My job was to make sure a great show went on, and so I'm guessing some of the similar satisfaction for you comes from like when they have that great victory, being able to know that you influenced and set that up for that victory is probably really big. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think it's like it's not as glorious to be a player when you finally get those victories, but I think what is the most rewarding part for me is to kind of feel that you have affected lives permanently in a positive way. And
Yep.
like looking back at like talking with players I've coached in the past and having those conversations and having like this brotherly love somehow between one and another is something that I appreciate a lot. And I think the opportunity to affect someone's life positively is something that I cherish a lot.
So since we're talking about going pro, I think this is a good segue here. A lot of you probably heard we just brought on a new player yesterday, Mickey X. Is that, am I pronouncing that right? By the way, I don't even know. Is that how you pronounce it, Mickey?
Mickey X pretty much.
Okay.
It's like I call him Mikey, but he hates that.
That's a coach thing, right? So,
Yeah.
well, because the funny part is I got asked that, and I was like, you know what? We're so used to typing to one another, I honestly don't know how it's pronounced. So, but so we brought in a new player. He's 17. It's his first pro gig. He was a sub for Fnatic, but of course he didn't play, so he was just a sub in name. And so the question becomes, what was it that crossed him over to being a pro? Like, what were those things? Because someone in chat actually asked, Jacob, would you agree that when I say that generally you shouldn't try to go pro if you're a below challenger? Okay, so that's more specific. I'm going to say generally. What are some of the things that you recognize as those things that you can point to that say you're probably ready to start pursuing a pro path as a player?
Well, I think it's pretty much, you could say in a way that anyone can become pro, but mindset comes into play, and not everyone has the correct mindset. Sure, mindsets can change, but some mindsets cannot change. That's something that you just have to accept.
Yeah.
And sure, you know, it's very common that people say that anyone can become a pro, but I think I disagree to some point. It has to be natural to some degree, very, very natural. And I think if you have this mindset to every day push yourself, and you know, it's very easy for people to set a goal for a year, you know, like the New Year's resolution. You know, that's very, very easy to say, oh, I'm going to become a pro this year. But the idea should be that you're supposed to set hourly goals, minute goals. So you push every minute that you have, because in reality, what it is, you can kind of paint it on a paper. You have a race. And as Al Pacino said, you know, it's a game of inches in a way, you know.
Yeah.
What do you do with every single hour? What do you do with every single minute? Do you just play mindlessly, or do you actually play with a goal and a purpose? And, you know, it's so easy. And I come across so many people that say, I want to become pro. I have decided to become pro. I've quit school to become pro. But that doesn't mean jack shit. What you do every single hour and what you put in every single hour is what is going to matter in the end.
Yeah.
And this comes naturally to some, and less, and it's going to be harder for others. And I think that is where the difference lies when people say anyone can become pro. It's a question of mindset, right?
What's that MMA fighter, the guy that retired and then came back or whatever recently? I'm not an MMA guy. I know there's a big story about him that he...
Conor McGregor?
Yeah, exactly. And there was a quote he said about the fact that he's not more talented than anyone else. He just works harder, you know, and that's all it is. And I do believe to some extent that's absolutely true. If you look at guys like the great Ray Allen. Ray Allen's one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. Top 3, at least, you know, shooters in NBA history. And Ray Allen was 35, 37, 39 years old, and still every single day would go to the gym long before anyone else arrived by himself and just shoot three-pointers over and over and over again. And that's because that's what made him greater than everyone else. No one could ever catch up to Ray Allen, because as you were getting better, so was he. And so you were increasing it at the same pace. You'll never close the gap that way.
Yeah,
and
it's a race. It's a race.
It is a race. Yeah. And you know what, Jacob, I'm a huge fan of the Spurs. Like I mentioned, I got to watch this guy crush our dreams because of it, right? Like he had this shot falling out of bounds, someone his hand in his face, a buzzer beater 3 to win a game. And that doesn't happen if you haven't prepared for years and years and years and years and years, right? It's not, I decided I'm going to be that good, right?
There's like a similar story with like one of the bigger teams in soccer. Yes,
it's hard
like
for you to say. I can tell you're like soccer.
It's like Neymar was going to his first practice, and to decide to kind of impress the manager, he wanted to arrive 2 hours early. And this team also have Messi. You probably heard of Messi, of course.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And he wanted to impress the manager by arriving 2 hours early. And when he arrived 2 hours early, the best player in the world was already there practicing penalty kicks. You
That's
know?
right.
And I think in the end, you know, I think there's a saying that kind of speaks to me a lot and has shaped a lot in the way I'm thinking about things. It's conquer the enemy within, and the enemy outside will do you no harm. It's pretty
Yeah.
much if you have a clear mind and you are dedicated and you've decided and you are willing to put in that work, it doesn't matter what people say, it doesn't matter what people do. Everything what is going on in here is what matters.
Yeah, I think there's an obsessive nature too that has to exist. You know, Kobe Bryant became Kobe Bryant because he was obsessed with being great. Like there's all consuming. You know, and some people can skate by a little bit with a little bit of a less mindset if they're maybe naturally talented or they got that head start on people. Like they started playing when they were super young, so they have just more hours in general in whatever game or sport it is. But typically, your all-time greats, Michael Jordan's another one, right, where he was absolutely passionately obsessed with winning to the point where people don't know his gambling thing was just because he needed to fill that void of not winning when he wasn't playing basketball. He needed to be winning every single day, right? And I always recommend this book to people. There's a great book called The Facebook Effect, and it's all about how Zuckerberg founded that company. And you don't think of, we're talking about sports here and esports, why would you compare the two? But I think Zuckerberg is the exact definition of somebody who is obsessed with winning, right? And if you read the ways he was like lived, eaten, breathed Facebook for all those years, it's why they're a gajillion-dollar company now, and the choices he made where he barely slept and worked on the company 24/7, and like he even had a pact with his girlfriend that she got 2 hours a week. That's it. The rest of the week was devoted to the company. And he said, look, if you don't like it, you can't be my girlfriend. Like, this is what I'm doing right now, right? This is the most important thing to me. So I think that's important for anybody going into esports too.
Yeah, it's like I can definitely recognize myself when I was wanted to become a pro player. That like the obsession, it became like at one point, like it was during the time I went to school, and I had this schedule where I slept like 2 hours a day, and I brought a laptop to school to play during school, and the only thing I was focused on was getting better at League because I wanted to become the best so badly. And in the end, like I even pushed away friends, family, and loved ones because it was sure at this point in time I've realized and I've kind of I have a clearer grasp of my priorities. But at that time, I can recognize what you're saying. You know, I was super obsessed.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna kind of segue this a little bit here to talk about league as a whole. So the big challenge that football, we'll say, soccer, whatever you want to call it, doesn't have, the challenge that basketball doesn't have is we're not going to get to a point where the engine underlying the game is not strong enough anymore, or people don't want to look at old pixels, right? Like that's not going to happen. Where league is now, was it 10 years old? I don't know the exact age.
It's 7 years old.
7,
If I
okay.
remember correctly, yeah.
But it's old for a video game. I mean, it's extremely old for a video game. You know, very few games other than things like World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Brood War, etc. Very few games last this many years. It's an infinitesimally small number. You know, you've devoted your entire career to this game, and at some point, let's say the scene shifts on. It's got to be something that's in the back of your mind at points, right?
Of course, of course. I think that also is a part of the risk that we were talking about earlier. Is when it comes to when it comes to being a pro player, it's like you don't know when a game changes, but there is something that carries on and follows you between games if you want to continue being a pro or continue working in the competitive aspect of esports. Then these traits that pushed you to the top in League of Legends are going to help you in a different game for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think it's random that I competed in Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft. I don't think that's random at all. I think that lies within my mindset. And for anyone else who is a pro player, I think they are a pro player for a reason, unless it's completely random and they have like a fluke split and they are randomly there. Okay, but if they have a long, healthy career in a specific game and a game dies, I think if they carry on the same traits and have enough energy to push themselves through another phase of kind of this rebirth, then I think you will survive.
I like that kind of mentality of what you can. Well, it goes back to what you said earlier, right? Like everything you're doing also is going to transfer over to your life outside of gaming. So therefore, of course, it would have to transfer to even within gaming, right? So that's an interesting concept, and I don't know that a lot of people think that far down the road. I know you've seen it with the guys. We have these young guys, and they don't think very far ahead of what's happening today, right? Like that's very common among esports athletes. And for those who don't know, all the players go in for this player summit every split, and they sit down with a bunch of Riot folks, and they learn a bunch of stuff, and they talk to them about social media. They talk to them about not being toxic, all these different things that the traps players fall into basically that ruin their careers. And I'll never forget Crepo sitting in that room talking to the guys about why he is successful today, like why he is where he is, as opposed to being a washed up player that just isn't relevant anymore, which there's lots of. And a big part of it was that he saw that his career as a League of Legends pro wasn't forever, and how did he set himself up for that in the long run? And it was little things, right? It was making sure to tweet every single day, and it was making sure to have an Instagram account that he put stuff on a regular basis, and just like setting himself up so that he had a fan base so that you can move game to game, or you can move job to job like he did. He didn't switch games; he stayed within the same game. But even just a little bit of outlook matters, right?
Yeah, yeah, and definitely, I think that's why I love the notion of just setting hourly goals and minute goals and daily goals. You need to make sure you somehow improved yourself from yesterday for the day that is to come, right?
Yep.
You don't want to stand still ever. You want to move forward. And it can be applied to anything, you know. You want to get ripped and you want to get buffed, you just start working out, right?
Like
There's
me.
a process, there's a progress,
It's
right?
right here.
Same thing with the social media presence, exactly the same thing. So it's all about progression, right? And who is going to be ahead in this race, if you want to call it that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The
totally
race of
agree.
life.
It's like anything you pick, right? Anything you pick, you've got to chip away at, as you said. Like, there's a term for it for anyone who's never heard of SMART goals. It's a abbreviation, and I always miss one of them, but it's like M is measurable, A is achievable, T is time bound. I can't write the S and the R, but the point is that you don't go, my goal is to win worlds, right? Like that's a how do you get there, right? You say my goal is I'm going to increase my creep score per minute by 5 over the next 3 weeks, right? And then you set actual tasks to help you get there. And those are achievable, time bound, reasonable as they are. I remember that. Maybe I'll think of the S, but I think that's totally true. There's an interesting discussion going on in chat here that I think sparked out of the idea that people are so obsessive about something, and because video games are so stigmatized, right? That it's, oh, they're bad for you. We were told not to do them, and it ruins your social skills. All these things that people hear that and they think, oh, well, that's terrible. It's awful. It must have ruined things for you. I come from a very traditional sports background. I played sports all through high school, 3 sports all year round. I know it'll look like it, but that's what I did. I'm from a small town, right? And I would beg to say that it's exactly the same in traditional sports. I have friends that went on to play college ball and then even into being backups in the NFL, for example, and they didn't have lives, right? Like they did, but their life was football, and that's it. There was nothing else. They went to school, practiced, went to the gym, ate the right food, did their homework, went to bed, and that was every day, 7 days a week. And that happened through college. It happened after college, and that's what made them have a career the way they did, and that's why they're one of, 1 in a billion, or I don't know what, as a terrible metric, whatever it is. So I mean, what was 1 in a billion? There would be very, very many football players now, would there? But to the point being that I think that stigma around video games makes people look and go, oh, that must be so bad. How can you be so obsessed with that? You miss out on other parts of your life, but it's no different than anything else that you want to be the best at, right?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think if you want to become the best of the best in something that is so competitive, then you have to. That's what it is. You have to invest your entire life into it.
Yeah. Okay, so here's an interesting question for you. You talked a lot about your own philosophy, and your philosophy obviously has been shaped by people you've met along the way. Maybe, I don't know if you have one single best piece of advice, but maybe more than one of things that you heard along the way that have helped your career grow. There's been some specific things that helped you maybe miss pitfalls or make changes along the way?
Well, I think falling into pitfalls is good. I don't think there's any negative experience because you can always take something positive from whatever happens in life.
I told you he's not really 20 years old. This guy's like 57 or something.
And it's like, sure, there's been moments where things have been horrible, but this simple mind, like this simple idea of that no matter what happens, you can take something positive out of it. You can avoid it for next time. And I think that idea of this idea, I think, like I realized back in season 4, and it made me reflect on my entire career. You know, there's been moments where, like, we were playing LCS qualification, we were in a 2-0 situation, and my teammates just tilted off the face of the earth. And at that time, I was very, very angry. But reflecting on that, after realizing this notion that you can take something positive out of every experience, I look back at that and I'm fine, right? I'm fine. I can look back at that and what could I do different? What could I do better, right? Mm-hmm. And this idea, I don't remember who exactly taught me. I think I remember reading it somewhere, and I feel like this has helped me a long way. And also this line that I like to share a lot is, you put time into kind of making the process better. You know, a process is, for example, let's say I'm going to make an iPhone, right? That's a process. Or let's say I want to work out and become buff. There's a process there. The result doesn't matter. It's very, very easy to think about the result, but in the end, what actually matters is the process, because the byproduct is going to be the result. That's just something that is going to happen regardless. So you just put emphasis on the process. Yeah. I don't remember who told me this line. I think it was the current coach of Manchester United that said it, Louis van Gaal, that said you just put emphasis on the process, the results come later. And I feel like these two lines, along with the conquer the enemy within thing, I think this has kind of shaped the way I think regarding almost anything.
That's cool, man. I like that. And, you know, being a guy, for those that don't know, I did manufacturing for 5 years before I started this organization. And it was a very big jarring change for me, going from entertainment industry where things are kind of chaotic like esports, right? And things are also very fluid, if you will, right? Where manufacturing is very structured and organized, and you have quotas to make and all this stuff like that. But I was very lucky in that the organization I worked for 4 of those 5 years was one that was starting to implement lean manufacturing. And if you never heard of lean, lean is all about eliminating waste and structuring process, and it helps you understand the best way to be the most efficient. So I know you love the word efficiency. You and I have talked about that, right? Only so many hours in the day that you can get stuff done. So why not be efficient during those hours? Yes. And even if they're I even think of it during my hours of pleasure when I'm playing a video game or I'm watching television. It's like, what are the things I can accomplish during this time rather than staring at the wall, right? Unless it's efficiently staring at the wall and maybe thinking about something. But nevertheless, when you look at lean manufacturing, what's really cool is you're right, they take the product as the result of all these processes along the way, and they even break them down into individual processes, and then they start going, okay, well, if we change over here, how does that affect over here, and does that improve things? We're not even going to think about the end product. Eventually we'll look at it to make sure that what we're doing over here, the tinkering, gives us a good end result, but we're not going to think about that at all. We're just going to look at all these processes. And I spent a lot of time doing that, and it was really kind of neat to see the results as we would, you know, a good example is we made a change on a big machine. We made paperboard boxes, like your cereal boxes, right? And we're making a change on this one section of the machine, and it made the machine like 10% more efficient. Now think how much 10% is over 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's an enormous amount of money, right? We didn't, you know, go buy another machine or something like that. We just did the process better, and that was it. And I think that esports has a lot to learn there. And we're young. We're a young industry, right? Paper's a 1,000-year-old industry, so I'm totally with you on the process thing.
Yeah, it's like the word efficiency is like the speed you're running this race we've been talking about. Right. It's like the speed you're running at, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I saw someone in chat mentioning that Louis van Gaal is crazy. I agree that he's a bit crazy, but to be honest, you know, there's been a lot of people in history that have been crazy, that have said very great things.
Yep.
So I don't think you should judge the content that someone provides based off the person.
Yeah,
that's very important.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And we would be missing some things like the great paintings of Salvador Dali, for example. That guy was nuts, you know. And so I love his art, though. So Um, let's talk League of Legends a little bit, just specifically about the team, because people want to know. Of course, I know you get these kinds of questions all the time, but what are your goals for the split? Like, what are you aiming for?
Well, I don't like setting like set goals because, to be honest, it's very hard to predict the future, and you never know what's going to happen. You know, you
Hmm.
can make estimations, sure, but I don't know if one day I'm going to walk on the street and get hit by a car. You know, so I'm a person that likes to take things day by day, and for now, the most important thing always for me, and is going to be in the future as well. Someone's called me on FaceTime. I'm just going to close it down. Give me 1 second.
He's too popular, guys. We'll slow this down.
Oh my goodness, the sound is killing my ears. Okay,
The good news is none of the rest of us could hear it. So
you're lucky. Okay, I was talking about the goals, right? And
yeah, yeah, the day by day portion of things.
and I like to take things day by day. Sure, I have this notion of the future and the past in my mind and how it affects what I'm doing that day, but I think the most important thing for me and what my goal is to make sure that we are as efficient as possible every single day. And then the results will come. I think we have a potential. Sure, predictions and potential is a different thing. I think we have a potential now with this roster and the experience that we have to make playoffs. But then again, you never know what kind of problems you will run into.
Sure.
My goal is to make sure we are as efficient as possible in practice, in everything that we do during the split.
I
And
think
hopefully it will bring the correct results.
I think even just seeing the guys or having the guys seeing that, oh, we can play against the best, right? Like that hopefully helped them understand a little bit of whether they say it out loud or not. In the back of every young player's mind is, can I play with these guys who I've been watching as an idolizing for a little bit, right? So now when they almost perfect game Fnatic, for example, and Reckless is like a legend now, over LCS, does that help them go, okay, I can play against this guy, right? Like we can play against him. So. Um, I think that to me, at least from an outsider, noobish League of Legends person, I think of it in terms of that, and similar to what you're saying, right? Like the progress is there, and that's what's important. So there's a really another interesting question from chat here that I'll throw you a comment here, A or 7A, about the idea that if you're older and want to start doing something, so there are definitely cases of people that start things much later. Great basketball players, for example, who didn't touch a ball until they were 16 or 17 years old. They had huge physical advantages, though, of course. That's what made it happen. When I was in undergrad, I went for a theater, so I was the theater, dance, and musical theater department. I remember this one guy who came to school and he never danced before in his life, and he went in as an actor, and he took his first dance class at 18 years old, and he graduated at 22 and went on to a major dance company, and just, again, physically gifted, right? So that doesn't that's not the normal. But I would recommend you check out a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and what Outliers talks about is this really awesome concept about the 10,000 hour rule, and it kind of goes back to what Jacob was talking about this, the number of hours you put in and how you use those hours. There's this idea that you hit a point in the number of hours you've put in that you master something, you master your craft. So you can start at 20, right? Like you can theoretically do it. It's gonna be a lot longer till you hit your 10,000 hours, though. Than the guy, the kid who started playing piano at 3 years old, or the guy who started playing League at 9, or any of those kind of things like that. So. I don't know if you run into a lot of those. I don't know the ages people start, and maybe you run into it more than I do, Jacob. But people who they just are better younger because maybe they started playing at 7 or 8 years old as opposed to 14, 15.
I think it comes down to the same old thing as before. I think as you grow older, you kind of you kind of have already established your mindset about things. And I think the earlier you learn that every day and every hour matters, then obviously it's going to be easier for you. I think if it just comes down to mindset. I don't think age is that relevant exactly in esports. It's kind of easier for younger kids to find love for something like League of Legends. I think it's very common that you have like a 15-year-old that all of a sudden is rank 1 on the server, and he just plays the game because he loves it. He doesn't really put that much thinking into it as we are discussing right now. I don't think he sits down and thinks, I'm going to put in every single hour, I'm going to put in work. He just plays the game because he loves it, right?
Yep.
So sure, there's a contrast where things are easier for some, but in the end, I think what's important is your mindset.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And you know what you just said goes back to this idea of um, efficiency. We'll just go back to the word, right? It's there. We kind of a theme the whole hour, right? If you wanted to answer your question, it's how efficient are you going to be, right? Can you beat the 14-year-old? Well, if you're more efficient than him, sure, right? So. Judy had a question about how difficult it was for you to transition from a player with an ethereal game sense into something you can manage and measure the progress in others. What's the process like of taking your own measurement and applying it to others?
Well, I think the I am happy I was a player before. Very, very happy. I think it is helping me immensely, simply because I've been in the situations that they are going to be in. And the players can trust my judgment when I say, this is going to be happening in game, this is what you're going to think in game, this is what you need to do, right? And having been in that position already, I think is helping me immensely, because there is something very, very different with watching the game from an analytical point of view and actually living it and experiencing it on stage. It is very, very different. And well, measuring, I don't think of it in that particular way. Wait, can you actually repeat the question for me?
Yeah, sure. She said, how difficult was it for you to transition from a player with an ethereal game sense into something you can manage and measure the progress in others? So if you can't really identify it and put it into words for yourself, how do you measure it in others?
All right, all right. So add on top of what I said earlier, the fact that, back in the day, I'm a part of the first era of coaching, right, in the West.
Yeah,
when it comes
yeah,
to
for
League of
sure.
Legends, the first era. And before that, there was pretty much no coaching. And what you did was you discussed the game between each other. You said, oh, you did this shit, you did this good, we need to do this. And you basically had a conversation, you had a discussion.
Sometimes there was yelling.
Sometimes there was yelling, sometimes there was laughing as well. Very emotional business, but I think personally, I feel like that conversation, it helps me that I know how players think and how they kind of act in game and what they experience in game. I think it helps me immensely, and I think the transition has been rather smooth.
Okay, great. So we're getting near the end of the show here, folks. I'll do my usual plug here, show you a couple things. Before I do, now's the time if you have any silly questions you want to ask, things like, what's his favorite way to have an omelet served. Now's a good time to toss them in chat. In the meantime, I'm going to show you, for those who never visited Splyce before, we do have the most comprehensive listing of esports events. Check it out when you have a chance. There's all kinds of stuff to watch. We also have great content from some of the top writers in esports. Thorin, Stuchu, so on and so forth, have written articles for us over the year. A lot of great content there. So make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, yada yada, all those good places. And we try to keep up with make sure you have a lot of the relevant news that's going on in the scene, and anything you want to watch, we're going to be tweeting about it. So also, Mr. Mebdi over here does do coaching. If you're looking to get some coaching during the off season, you can find out what it's like to be coached by an LCS coach, part of the original OG crew of LCS coaches. So check out his listing. If you go to his twitch.tv/YamatoCannon, you'll see the listing down below where you can click on to get the information. And I want to just throw a shout out to all of our great sponsors: Scuff Gaming for great controllers, Twitch, XL Esports Academy for your esports coaching needs, Supporterly, which brings a great way for supporting esports teams, our awesome Corsair peripherals, got some cool mice and keyboards, all that kind of good stuff, G2A for all your gaming purchasing needs, and then of course G Fuel, which, man, they make some tasty drinks, let me tell you. It's one of the best sponsors to have when you're real parched and thirsty, because a lot of energy drinks taste like crap and theirs don't. So cool. At that point, let's hop back in and talk a little bit about some of these questions. We've got one last rather serious question, and then I'll see if there's any other silly ones in here. So how would a young and fairly new coach with no contacts get noticed without anyone really promoting them? I think that's a great question, because how do you get into being a coach?
Oof. I think, I get asked this question a lot, and, even coaches in the best teams barely get noticed. So,
Right.
it's a very, very difficult thing if you weren't a part of the first initial wave when you actually came in. I think the easiest way is through education. I think degrees in general are very, very attractive to a lot of people. You know, the first wave, most of us that are coaches now and were in the start, we were just players that people thought would be good coaches, and that happened. I don't think that is something that will happen again. You know, the process of becoming a pro player and then being a pro player and then transitioning to coach, I feel like that ship has sailed. I feel like the best way is through education at this point. Also, something that some people do is try to find an analytical role and, of course, try to work with teams and get experience in that regard. For example, working under a head coach, you know, that is something that happens in most traditional sports where they work under someone that is a head coach and eventually they take on their own reins based off of that experience.
Yeah, I think that the just from a somebody who's followed traditional sports for so long, been involved, and I think we've already talked about following the model, right? Like, there's a lot to learn there. Is there you might as well go out and find somebody that does it and see if you can work with them, or just take it head on. Go find a challenger team or a CIS team or a UK team or one of these regional teams that doesn't have a coach, right? They're just five guys and be like, hey, I'd love to work with you guys. Can I help you out? I don't need any money. I just really want the experience. I mean, results is what matters, right? In the end, like, that's all anyone's going to care about. If you go, well, I have a really great potential only goes so far, right? So. I would recommend that a lot of what I've seen throughout esports has just been people showing, like, especially in coaching, right? Because playing, you want to do that anyway. Like, you're going to play a lot of the game, but if you show that you're willing to spend all those hours doing the grunty work that no one wants to do, right? Breaking down game tape or writing out kind of all the play sheets that you need, etc. It shows something about your work ethic too, which I think is really important.
It's like one simple thing. The way I like to simply put it is, if you impress the right people, you move forward.
Yeah. I mean, this is an industry of connections, like many industries are, let's be honest. And how often we'll go, hey, I'm looking for an XYZ. Anyone know one? It's somebody like, yeah, I got this person. And you never even list the position, right? That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Here's a good one. If you weren't a coach, what would you do instead? I love this kind of questions.
Oof.
A model.
Like, I'm just gonna just push esports aside and then think outside of that spectrum. What would I do? Well, I've always had a thing for civil engineering, and also
Cool.
civil engineering was my first kind of dream job or what I wanted to do, but something that has become an interest of mine very lately is poker and also pretty much investment banking.
Whoa. There's somebody, I won't out him, but there is actually a former pro who is now an investment banker, and it's the weirdest thing when you see him all dressed up in his full investment banking duds, and you're like, you used to be a pro gamer. Where's your jeans and a t-shirt, right? That's awesome. I love it. And I will say, as somebody who came into esports much later in life, I'm turning 37 next month, and I have 3 kids. I'm kind of the old man most of the time in the room. There is a lot of value to having had outside experiences, you know. And I have worked in entertainment. I've worked in manufacturing. I've been a cook for many years through high school and college. I did carpentry, like construction, etc. And all those different things, I think, help shape the way I run the organization. I'm glad I had all those experiences. So to Jacob's point, like you mentioned, 3 or 4 different things. I think that's great to have lots of different interests, you know. So let's see. So what else we got here? I don't know what an ASMR video is. Maybe you do, but someone asked if you can make one.
I think ASMR is where you get like tingles, because I don't know why. Like, there's. I'm just gonna give you an example, I guess.
Okay.
No.
I'm a little nervous here.
I'm not gonna make one now. I can't make them on myself, like by myself. But let's say I can describe one to you. Pretty much, let's say there's a video. And
See, he's coaching right now. You see how this works, guys?
there's a video, and you get like a virtual haircut, and the sound is made in a specific way, as if you are in the room with this person, and specific sounds and specific noises, like, for example, knocks of the fingers or whatever, is going to get specific tingles. And this is like not, it doesn't work for everyone, right? But
Love it. I love what the internet has brought us these days. Like what would have been thought of as like a preposterous idea. You just knew exactly what they were talking about. So, proof again that I'm an old man here. So, um,
I've heard
questions.
this a lot. I've heard this a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Question about yes, there is still a coaching position is open, assistant coach. We have not hired for that. Is that a question in chat? Why do I only have 257 followers? Well, if you click that button, I'll have 258, obviously. So please do so. And Nimitz asks, what is your understanding of the Korean coaching culture? Example, Koma.
I was very fortunate actually. Like I've had like a kind of sneak peek of what he's doing because I got to work with Horo, which was a former SKT player. He was the jungler of Micho Makers, and I got to work with him. And he has principles that I kind of took a lot of ideas from. I was very, very fortunate, and I'm still very, very happy that I got to see this and to hear this from a person like Horo that, of course, worked under Koma. And what was important and what is important to Koma is the mindset of players. It was basically boiled down to three simple principles: respect for the game and its players, and always putting in your best effort. And three was to do not emotions into it. Pretty much, you need to look at it as business. Mixing emotions into it is something that, like, emotions usually become a distraction. If you become angry, it's a distraction. If you become sad, it's a distraction. If you become happy, it's a distraction. Of course, we are human. You're not supposed to completely become a robot and remove all emotions from your life, but the important thing is to understand how they affect you and not let them affect you in times that actually require you to be completely focused. And of course, this is not, I'm not kind of quoting Koma or anything, but this is how I perceive it and how I kind of, with my own idea to it, after speaking to Horo and him telling me how things were done in SK Telecom.
Very cool, man. I love hearing this kind of the mentality you're talking about too, by the way, is no different than not just traditional sports, but great leaders in any kind of company, right? So there's a crossover there to how someone would run, I don't know, a Fortune 500, for example, right? So
It's like one thing I can quote from Koma right away was that he used to be a pro player himself, right? And it was kind of a short and sweet career, but a line that Horo told me that he liked using every time to kind of motivate the players. He said that I had my chance, I didn't take it. If you guys don't work hard, you're not taking it either. You're going to work hard and you're going to take the chance that is given to you.
yeah, you got to go out and take it. There's this great mentality of the idea that if you want opportunity, you got to take it, right?
Yeah, it's like you don't wait for the perfect opportunity. You take the opportunities that are given to you and you make it perfect.
When my wife and I'll tell you when we first started this company. So we started this in December 2014, January 2015 is when we started working on it. We launched the site in April for the when it just was just a TV guide, and that's all it was. And when we first talked about doing this, I mean, it was like a fun hobby thing that me and a buddy and my wife were doing together. But I turned to my wife and we were talking about turning it into an actual company more than just a hobby. And I said, you know, I know this is like probably the worst timing. We have three kids, one of which was 2 months old. We have a mortgage. I had a good job. Things were going like every way you'd want to go, right? But this opportunity was right now, right? We had this company that filled a really good place. We had an industry that was growing at the right pace. Like we got included at the right time. And I said, yes, 3 years from now will be much better, right? My kids will be off in school and stuff like that. But opportunity doesn't wait. So I have a choice. I can either attack it right now and go for it, or we can wait. And sometimes people ask, like, why do we have the logo we have? And we talked a bit about it what's the snake, and what it is it represents a couple things. Number one is our style. It's very clean, it's very sleek, but also our aggressiveness, and we we knew that these opportunities will slowly disappear as esports gets bigger and bigger. And so we went very aggressively and attacked the industry. And that's why we started a pro team in August. And by December had 6 teams, across the world. So something that I'm pretty proud of at this company. So if you want like an actual real life example of exactly what he's talking about, that's exactly how it works, right? Be aggressive. Go out there and take what you want. So.
So
Um,
pretty much you're saying you took a bite of the sweet apple
oh,
to.
that's right. That's right. I just took it by the shoulders and ripped it out of there. So, all right. So, last couple of questions. We'll pick one last one here. Okay, we got one. What do you expect from Mickey X? That's definitely a question for you.
Ooh, I expect great things. I've actually followed him rather closely. I think the biggest blessing to recognizing new talent has been the system that everyone complains about, is dynamic queue. While the queue system is very very poor, I think it does give you some high level games at some times when you get like LCS teams versus LCS teams. And I was a part of these groups and I played with Koba, and sometimes we happen to have this guy called Fnatic Mickey X in our team, right? And
Nice.
this guy showed, like, you get to know him, and we started talking outside of the game, and I realized rather fast that this guy has a great mindset. He's learning fast. Whenever I suggest something to him without even having any kind of coaching connection to him or anything, I'm just saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do this. You should do this." It instantly clicks, and he moves on and he takes it with him. Very very sharp mind. And when it comes to expectations, I think this guy is a person that you can see competing for like the top position of his role for sure. It's like there's been players, for example, Mithi, which I regard to be the best support in Europe right now. He has said great things about this guy, and I fully believe that this guy is going to be freaking good.
All right. I like it. I like it. Well, on that note, for anyone that knows, I like to keep things very strict on time because I value everyone's time. Thank you for being here, Jacob, as always. It was very insightful
My pleasure,
hearing
my pleasure.
the mindset behind a coach and how you build a winning culture. Folks, we do this every Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 8 CET, was at 11 Pacific, all these different time zones killing me here. We try to bring in different insiders to come talk about the industry. If you want to check out previous recordings, go to youtube.com/Splyce. We've had on Thorin, we've had on EG and Control, we've had Robert Del Papa from Alpha Draft FanDuel. Too many people to say, Dignitas Odie, etc. And we'll continue to do so. Make sure you check out Splyce.gg for all your needs of broadcasts and esports and editorial needs. Make sure you follow twitch.tv YamatoCannon. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. At SplyceGG is our main account. At Splyce Pros for the team. We separate those out. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing you on other streams in the future, guys. And Coach YamatoCannon, looking forward to some ass kicking in the LCS this season.
For sure, man.
All right, take care, everyone.